Hi, friends. I'm Dr. Delphina JOYce, Messenger of Joy, coming to talk to you today about invisible drivers, how to reclaim control and lead with joy intentionally. So, we don't always know what invisible drivers are. So, we're going to dive into what they are, what they mean, and how to learn and grow from them. So, you may think that you are consistently in control of what's happening, but really, invisible drivers are what is operating and running 90% of your day. It's what's happening in your mind, and you may not be fully aware of it. These are called autopilot behaviors. Many leaders operate on autopilot. They're unaware of their patterns. They don't even realize that they shape their decisions, their behaviors, and their leadership presence. So, what are autopilot drivers, and how do we recognize them and how do we improve them? You see, by recognizing these drivers, you can align your actions with your values and lead intentionally. I learned a lot about my values when I started diving into what I thought was really important to me, but I realized that my behaviors were not in alignment with what I thought I valued most. And so I made some adjustments. Invisible drivers are your automatic habits, your beliefs, and your mental scripts that influence your actions without conscious thought. And here are some examples. So, an autopilot pattern can be formed from your experiences, from your conditioning, and it is reinforced at an unconscious, your subconscious level. These hidden forces happen oftentimes without your awareness, and they shape your decisions. So, what do they look like? What do invisible drivers look like? Let's dive in real quick here and look at specific automatic habits. So, I've seen these often. That's why I'm using them as examples. The email vortex. How many of you start your day by diving into your emails, looking at your inbound requests, and that dictates your priorities rather than starting strategically? If you fall into the email vortex, this is an autopilot behavior. Let's look at another one. How many of you recognize this one? This is called the Echochamber Reliance. It's easy to go straight to our colleagues, our friends, the sources that we always go into. We always ask the same people for their thoughts and their opinions. Well, this is a habit, this is an autopilot behavior, and it could limit your fresh perspectives and innovative solutions. Let's look at another one. Have you ever caught yourself doing this? I've definitely caught myself doing this. This is the solution sprint. The solution sprint happens when leaders are under pressure and they jump quickly to solve the problems. They don't actually take the time to slow down, do a deeper analysis, what was the root cause, and they don't look at potential alternatives. I used to do this all the time. I was the person that people could come to solve the problems, and I jumped right in and I fixed it. But now that I have age and wisdom in my repertoire, I don't always jump to the answer. Now I sit back and watch because I've also learned not my monkey, not my circus. And it gives me the opportunity to allow others to be critical thinkers. And it also gives me time to be a critical thinker where I'm not jumping in and having my answers automatically. This is a autopilot behavior. It is the solution sprint. So, what are some other invisible drivers? Beliefs. Have you ever considered how your beliefs are actually running your life? Well, the power of belief, they are things, they're your unconscious thoughts that happen in your mind, and they steer your decision making, and they also affect your actions. There's been a lot of talk on poverty cycle, on people who are living in an abundant mindset or people who are not. They're living in a restrictive mindset. Well, this is rooted in your beliefs. And until you become aware of your beliefs, you might be operating on autopilot. Let's look at one of these invisible drivers. Is this your belief? I need to have all the answers. This belief often leads to micromanagement, and it stifles teams' initiative, and it prevents others from developing their own problem-solving skills. So if you're in the role of the leader and you think that you need to have all the answers, then you're going to stifle your team. If you are in the role of a team member and you're not responsible for leading the team, if you have a leader who is micromanaging, you may not speak up as much and you may not actually give your creative ideas, because why should you? Your boss has all the answers. Well, this is an invisible driver. When you think that you have all of the answers, that is a belief. Let's look at another one. Have you told yourself this one? Showing vulnerability is weakness. If they know that I can't do it, if they think I need help, then they'll see me as weak. Well, leaders often hold this view, and they tend to isolate themselves, and they inadvertently foster a culture where open communication and genuine connection are scarce. Why? Because if your leader can't be vulnerable and tell you, I don't know how to do this, or I need your help, then others may believe that they too can't ask for help. So that's the difference in the roles. This is an autopilot belief, and it is an invisible driver. Does this sound familiar? If I'm not busy, I'm not valuable. I smile and I laugh because this is actually one of the beliefs that is an invisible driver in my life. I grew up in a home where we could not leave any dirty dishes in the sink. We had to have everything in order. The house had to be extremely clean. And so I thought, aside from cleanliness is holiness, I also thought that sitting down on the couch and relaxing to watch a good movie meant that I was lazy, because my work ethic was so strong, and my internal belief thought was that if I was not busy doing something, then I was being lazy. And that is an invisible belief. It is a driver that can create chaos in your life, especially when it comes to holistic wellness. Here's another one. Do you recognize this pattern? Asking for help means I'm incompetent. Well, a belief such as this actually hinders delegation and collaboration. It's overwhelming because leaders ultimately are limiting the team's potential for collective achievement. You see, when we all have a piece in the overall success, then we feel like we are valuable. So when we ask for help, we are providing the opportunity and the blessing for others to have a piece of the success and the win. So recognize that pattern. The idea, the belief that asking for help means you're incompetent is a lie, but you must be able to recognize it before you can overcome it. Let's look at another one. So we've looked at so far, we looked at beliefs. Now we are talking about how do we break free. Well, when we can recognize these narratives, we can step forward and we can break them. How are mental scripts a part of invisible drivers? Have you ever considered this one? This is a mental script. A mental script is a thought that you have in your mind, and that thought may be, I'll handle it myself, meaning I can do it myself. I'm the only one that can do this, and I can do it the best, so I must do it myself. Well, this script often leads to burnout and micromanagement, preventing team members from growing and taking ownership of the work. This is important to recognize because as a leader, you don't have to handle everything. That's why there is collaboration, synergy, and team dynamics. So And I'm not going to dive into perfectionism, but that's part of this idea and this mental script that's operating in the back end. So, is this your mental script? Have you heard this one before? They should already know this. Assuming that common knowledge can lead to misunderstanding. Oh, I've seen this so much in my 30 plus years in education. Um, People don't want to be condescending. And so there's an assumption that common knowledge, even using the word common knowledge, uh, is unfair. You see, because if we assume that people already know certain things, then we, to some degree, can be taken away from their opportunity to learn. So we're not talking about being condescending. We're just recognizing that a belief in the back of your mind that states they should already know this means you're shitting on people. And we really shouldn't shit on people. It's not nice. So, one of my favorite mental scripts as an invisible driver is I don't have time for that. I laugh because this mental block often prioritizes urgent tasks over important strategic thinking, hindering long-term vision and innovation of the organization. So I don't have time for that. I'm going to give you a very specific example. I don't have time to go to the gym. I don't have time to go for a walk. I'm too busy. I have too much work. I have way too many things to do. Well, ultimately, you're hindering your holistic well-being because there's really important opportunities to prioritizing your self wellness, your self-care. So I say this is one of my most favorite mental scripts because I know that it plays in the background. So bringing it to your intention as an invisible driver. And here is one more. That's not how we do things. How many of you have joined a new team? You share an idea and they say, nope, that's not how we do it. We have never done it like that. This is how we do it. It's done like this in the past. Well, this particular belief, if it is a concrete stuck belief, sometimes it's just out of curiosity, like, oh, we've never done things like this before. That's new, right? That's a totally different energy behind that thought. But this is the thought that that's not how we do things. It's a powerful barrier to innovation. It closes people off. This script, which is a mental thought that's happening in the subconscious, dismisses new ideas and it maintains the status quo, even when change and adaptability are needed. So be aware of this invisible script as an invisible driver. So at this point, we have talked specifically about invisible drivers. And when they go unchecked, ouch, unexamined beliefs, habits can profoundly influence individuals and organizations. So, what are the invisible drivers that could be driving you? We've talked about automatic habits, we've talked about beliefs, and we've talked about mental scripts. Not only do they have a cost to you personally, because joy is journey options you choose. This is your joy. This is your mindset. These are your beliefs, your thoughts, your patterns, but they also cost in organizations and the price is high. So let's talk about how this influences organizations. Why? Because you're probably part of an organization. So organizations pay the price in this way. Three of them. Operational impact. What does that mean? Daily operations and productivity are affected by issues. Here's an example. Remember that email vortex? Boom. If you spend 80% of your day responding to emails, that's not necessarily strategy happening. That's more responding to what is in the now. And there are different ways to prioritize those things. Process inefficiencies. So when we're looking at workflow, let's say someone is being creative, they're like, hey, have we considered and a mental script. And if someone says, we don't do it that way, we've never done it that way. And it just automatically begins to stop and stifle the conversation. That is a mental script happening in the background. And it is costing the organization. And the third cost to an organization when these invisible drivers are running rapid is employee morale. The collective attitude and satisfaction of the workforce. That means that it's not just happening in one person, it's actually happening in multiple ways. And so, as an organization, you have the opportunity to support individuals with change. And that happens with joy. Journey options you choose. Joy is about your free will and your personal agency. And organizations can support their employees to learn and grow through professional development and personal growth. So the ripple effect of unexamined drivers affects leadership across the organization and across the employees. Here's some significant challenges that compound over time. Woo! Have you seen this? You know, organizations have culture and you can feel them if you pay attention when you walk in. So, missed opportunities. Automatic responses prevent leaders from seeing innovative solutions and strategic possibilities right in front of them. An individual missed opportunity, if a belief in your mind is, I'm not good enough, you miss the opportunity for the promotion because the thought in the mind that's automatic is, I'm not good enough. Do you see how missed opportunities happen from invisible drivers? What about inconsistent culture? This is a compound, right? Have you ever had been in an organization where you have a boss who can do it all, who knows it all, and so really you don't get a chance to learn and grow because you don't want to take risk? Because if you're wrong, that's not good. And actually, errors help you to learn and grow if you have good mentoring and you have coaching. So, inconsistent culture is when leaders operate on unconscious patterns and organizational values become words on a wall rather than lived experiences. I see this all the time. When you see a core value that says service, and then you go in and the person is ignoring you and they are talking to the employee and you're standing there for 5 to 8 minutes until they actually say, oh, how can I help you? That is inconsistent culture. And that's a compound challenge from invisible drivers and a need for training. What about the compound challenge of disengaged teams? Team members sense when leadership decisions come from autopilot rather than authentic, intentional choices. What does that mean? Here's an example. We know that a leader does not trust its team, the individuals in the team, when they do not allow delegation and people are penalized harshly for errors. You see, on the job training means that we might make an error. That's part of learning and growing. Teams know when they are safe and they belong, when they have that sense of belonging and they feel like they are a part of the win. That's when they're willing to take more risk. So, what is the solution for overcoming automatic drivers? Let's dive in. This is just a little snapshot, okay? This is part of the blog that I wrote, and I dive in a little bit more. The power of awareness. Once leaders become aware of their drivers, they can break unhelpful cycles and foster an environment where intentional choices drive team engagement, innovation, and growth, which ultimately thrives the team. So, how does awareness of invisible drivers transform leadership? It's a mindset shift. I have something called the Joy Success Quadrant, and there are 4 mindsets within that quadrant. There's the restricted mindset, the awakening mindset, the natural mindset, and the joy mindset. And in each of those quadrants, there's very specific knowledge, skills, and tools that help you to progress to the joy mindset. Now, remember, mindset isn't something that's static. It doesn't stay that way all the time. Why? Because we operate differently in different types of situations. In this particular case, in order to combat invisible drivers, there has to be a transformation of a mindset shift from the restricted to the awakening. Now, what does that mean? This shift is from unconscious reaction to conscious response. And when you recognize your invisible drivers, you unlock a new level of leadership effectiveness that creates lasting impact. And if you think you're not a leader, you are mistaken, because leadership starts with self. Yep. It's called self-leadership. It is our joy. Journey options you choose. It's about your free will, your personal agency, and the first individual that you lead is yourself. So, what does that mean? Here's an example. This is called the joy mindset self-awareness process. Within joy, we have joy jewels. The joy jewel awareness is phenomenal. And here's the process. How do you do this? You track your thoughts, you understand your emotions, you observe your behaviors, you recognize your patterns, and you commit to joy in the form of a daily practice. Now, there's many practices that you can do, and I dive in more in that in specific courses as well as workshops. So it just kind of depends on where you're at and what you would like to grow in. So here's an example of stopping unhelpful behavior patterns. We're not talking about thoughts, not talking about that. We're talking about behavior patterns. Awareness allows you to catch yourself in the moment, and you notice the script. The script is the thought. It goes the thought, and then you have the behavior. So it helps you to notice the thought that's happening in your mind. So here's an example. My thought, I am not good enough. My behavior, I do not go for that promotion. My thought, I don't know what to say, and what I have to say is not valuable. The behavior, I don't speak up. You see, the script, the belief, the thought that's happening in my mind results in a behavior, which is an outcome. And invisible patterns and drivers, they happen up in here. Hence the need for a mindset shift. So once you can begin to recognize your triggers, the automatic responses, and the patterns that no longer serve you, your leadership, your self-leadership will improve. So here is an example of how you can use the joy tool, self-awareness behaviors. This is a 6-step model. First, you observe. Notice your automatic responses. How are you handling different things? Automatically. You're paying attention. 2, you're identifying the situation or environment. Do I not speak up when I'm around certain people because I'm afraid that they're going to judge me or be critical? That's a very specific context. That's a very specific behavior that comes out in certain conditions. Pay attention to that. Number 3, impact. Reflect on how is this behavior affecting others and affecting me. So let's say that you are in a relationship and you don't want to say anything because you don't want to ruffle any feathers. Well, how's that impacting you? How's that impacting others? You can easily determine physical impacts of your behavior. So let me give you an example. I was in a relationship many, many years ago, and I was afraid to say anything because whenever I said anything, I always got pushback because I was wrong. I was wrong, and that's not true. And I ended up not really talking much because I didn't want to. I shut down. I got tired of hearing everything I said was wrong. And I just got exhausted of speaking in that relationship and I became real about it. And so the impact was that individual never heard my voice anymore. And I realized I didn't want to be in that relationship anymore because it wasn't serving that individual, it wasn't serving me. Maybe it was serving the individual because I wasn't saying anything. And so that person was dominating the relationship. But neither here nor there. That is an impact. Okay. Number four, choice. What alternative response is available? For me, I just said, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. And I hit the road. And I made a change, right? So, number five is to align your actions with your values. For me, I realized that I just couldn't be myself in that relationship because I got tired of the behavior of someone consistently, and we're not talking about every once in a while. This was a consistent, dominating, manipulating behavior. And I wasn't able to be myself in that I value conversation, I value collaboration. And so in that particular relationship, I wasn't aligned with my values. And so I knew that in order to be aligned with my values, I needed to change. And number six, practice. Pause before responding. So I had the opportunity to look at my own personal behaviors because it wasn't about the other person, it was about me. And I didn't want to be in that situation anymore. And I made the change. It wasn't about me trying to change that person because I'm not in control of that person, but I am in control of me. And Joy Journey Options You Choose is all about my free will and my personal agency. And I made the change. So this is the Joy Tool self-awareness, and it helps you to acknowledge your invisible drivers and make a change specifically in the area of behaviors. Now, I'm going to throw in here something about Joy Success Coaching with Intention. This is specifically speaking to individuals who coach. Now, here's the thing. We don't always think about ourselves as a coach. And if you're a parent, you coach. If you're in a relationship, potentially you could be coaching. If you're in a leadership role, you definitely coach and you get coached. I get coached. So the thing that's important to understand about coaching is, think about if you play softball, if you consistently miss hitting the ball and the bat doesn't hit the ball, then when your coach steps in and supports you with a different practice, boom, you can have a better result. So even skilled coaches operate on autopilot at times. The patterns that help an individual to be successful and an effective coach can also limit the impact if left unexamined. What does that mean? If, as a coach, I'm working with someone and I've seen this behavior before and I automatically go to that answer of coaching, then I may not be allowing for a deeper dive. So what does that mean? It means that your own invisible drivers shape how you listen, what you notice, and which interventions you offer. So as a coach, identifying your own invisible drivers helps you to unlock new dimensions. And this is all by self-awareness. So the better you become to be aware, self-aware, then the more impactful you are as an individual for yourself and for others. So here's a real world experience. So consider a leader who automatically becomes defensive when receiving feedback. This could even be in just personal relationships. If you're sharing a feedback, it really does matter how you share it. But if you are consistently speaking with someone who is defensive, they can't hear anything you say. Once you're aware of this invisible driver, they can choose a different response. So instead of shutting down, they can lean into curiosity, like, hey, tell me more about that. What do you mean by that, right? I'm talking about if you're in the position of being defensive. Someone tells you, hey, you raise your voice all the time. You're always yelling. Instead of saying, no, I don't yell, then it gives you the opportunity to actually slow down and say, can you tell me more about that? What do you mean? And When you dive in with curiosity, leaders can notice automatic responses during high pressure moments, and they can create space for thoughtful actions instead of reactive ones. That is a real world impact. That's a real world experience. And I talked about raising your voice. And in high emotional times, we do raise our voice. Not everyone, but I've seen myself emotional and I've seen myself do that. So, my example. So, how do you handle invisible drivers? You can model intentional decision making, interrupt unhelpful patterns, and build stronger trust and results. So, I gave you a joy process. I gave you a joy tool. We also have joy success coaching certification, which we walk you through 30 modules and teaching you to become a stronger coach. And we always start with self-leadership. And then we move into how do you support others? So your transformation starts now. How do you do that? Catch your hidden scripts and clarify where change is needed. You ready to lead with joy? Here it is. Simple. 1, 2, 3. Identify driver, invisible drivers, reflect on patterns, act intentionally. That quick, that easy. This dives into how do you uncover invisible drivers? You can do that through self-assessment, and I gave you a process for that. And how do you observe the impact? This goes back to that joy process that I told you. What patterns are emerging? What scripts do you see? And what are the results? And then how do you act intentionally with joy? Because joy is journey options you choose. It's about deliberate action aligned with your values. Thank you for your time. Let's dive into your next step, which is to choose joy. Remember to check out the blogs that are on joyoptions.org. And most importantly, when you go to joyoptions.org, take the joy mindset assessment. It is awesome. You take the assessment, it tells you where you are landing in that moment. It's real time. You get a report of your current mindset based on your answers in that moment, and you will receive knowledge, skills, and tools for, I don't know, 21 days, because 21 days is what creates a better habit. And it'll be in the form of 8 emails with resources for you. So all the best to you. Thank you. Remember to like, follow, and comment so that we can continue to learn and grow. Joy is journey options you choose.